Pack the bags and close the door. Don't drive away alone.
In the dead of the night I close my eyes, but my mind won't let me rest. Cause I'm haunted by the shadows that you instill in my head. Am I dead or alive? Cause it don't feel right with a hole inside this chest. Since you left, I'm a mess, I'm undead. Cause these nightmares, they come creeping, stealing my peace while I'm sleeping. Still got creatures under my bed, and I know they're never leaving. So I think I'll just keep them, let them fuck up all these demons that been keeping me from freedom. Finally, I can just let them go. Yeah, the boogeyman ain't got shit on me. I got one night light coming from my screen. Still stuck in the room, write melodies. But lately I could really use some fucking sleep. It really don't matter to me. I would give it all up for a couple of Z's. Yeah, give it all away for another dream. Just give me one night of some fucking peace. And please don't mind my mental. It gets fucked up when I grip the pistol. Plain and simple, gun to temple. Lights out now, low to hear the whistle.
Diggy, wake up.
In the dead of the night I close my eyes, but my mind won't let me rest. Cause I'm haunted by the shadows that you instill in my head. Am I dead or alive? Cause it don't feel right with a hole inside this chest. Since you left, I'm a mess, I'm undead. Cause these nightmares, they come creeping, stealing my peace while I'm sleeping. Still got creatures under my bed, and I know they're never leaving. So I think I'll just keep them, let them fuck up all these demons that been keeping me from freedom. Finally, I can just let them go. In the dead of the night, am I dead or alive? I've been running away from this pain. In the blink of an eye, I think I'm losing my mind. I think I really be going insane. In a dream I could fly way up in the sky, but the nightmare's where I stay. Yeah, these nightmares, they still haunt me ever since you went away. In the dead of the night I close my eyes, but my mind won't let me rest. Cause I'm haunted by the shadows that you instill in my head. Am I dead or alive? Cause it don't feel right with a hole inside this chest. Since you left, I'm a mess, I'm undead. I'm a mess, I'm undead.
11. The 0-point variable. POV. Nova Kim. The air conditioner in the stolen SUV had surrendered 20 miles back, somewhere near the scorched edge of Modesto. Now, the vehicle was nothing more than an enclosed aluminum box baking under the relentless California sun, a pressure cooker hurtling north along Milton Road. I sat in the rear, my spine pressed against the hot leather, my body rigid. Outside the window, the Central Valley was a blur of desiccated yellow grass and barbed wire fences, a landscape stripped of color and mercy. The heat was a physical weight, pressing against the glass trying to find a way in, but the temperature outside was irrelevant. The true danger was the thermal escalation inside the cabin. I closed my eyes, visualizing a thermometer. The mercury was rising, not in degrees Fahrenheit, but in decibels of emotional volatility. "It is suicide," Alasdair Finch spat from the middle row. His voice was jagged, vibrating with a frequency that grated against the base of my skull. "Absolute, unmitigated suicide. We don't know who is in that lab. We don't know what they want. And you want to waltz in like we're on a bloody holiday excursion?" "It's not a holiday, Al. It's an acquisition," Ronan Sato replied from the driver's seat. His voice was smooth, a polished stone skipping over a turbulent ocean. He adjusted the rearview mirror, his eyes briefly meeting mine before flicking back to the road. "We are currently resource poor. We have no safe house, no funding, and no allies. If there is technology in the Sierra, old Foundation tech, specifically, it translates to leverage. We need currency to survive. People are dying, Ronin." The cry came from beside me. Nia Adebayo. She was curled into the corner of the seat, her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around her shins. She looked small, fragile, like a structure whose load-bearing walls were beginning to buckle. Tears were streaming down her face, but she wasn't sobbing. It was a silent, continuous leak. "I can feel them," Nia whispered, her voice thick with the damp weight of second-hand trauma. It's overwhelming. The static is getting louder. We can't just use this place as a bank." "We can't." "We can if we want to live long enough to make a difference," Ronin countered, his tone hardening. He wasn't looking at Nia with sympathy. He was assessing her stability, calculating the depreciation of an asset. "Your empathy is admirable, Nia, but it doesn't pay for gasoline." "Stop it." Alasdair growled. I could see him pressing his palms into his eyes. Just stop the car. I need to get out. The lines, they're going wrong again. The horizon is bending. We are not stopping, Ronan said. We are exposed out here. I said stop. Alasdair slammed his fist against the doorframe. The vehicle swerved slightly. The noise escalated, a chaotic overlap of shouting, the engine's whine, and the rushing wind. To my left, Tenok Cardena sat like a monolith of compressed silence. He stared forward, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle feathering beneath the skin. He was absorbing the pressure, letting it build, a volcano waiting for a tectonic shift. I kept my eyes closed. The darkness behind my eyelids offered no sanctuary. The arguing, the oscillation between aggression and guilt, the weaponization of feelings, it triggered a retrieval error. A file I had tried to delete years ago forced itself open. Flashback initiated. The living room was high definition, sharp edges and stark lighting. The air was cold, smelling of stale coffee and expensive perfume. My mother was standing by the fireplace. She was crying. But even at 8 years old, I understood the physics of those tears. They were not a release of sadness. They were a tactical strike. They were designed to induce compliance. You don't love us, she sobbed, the pitch perfectly calibrated to shatter the silence. If you loved us, you wouldn't leave. You wouldn't destroy this family. My father stood by the door, his suitcase a dark anchor on the hardwood floor. His face was red, a mask of frustration and impotence. He turned to me, his eyes wide and desperate. He didn't see a child. He saw a judge he needed to bribe. Nova, he yelled, a hook of anger meant to drag me into the crossfire. Tell her. Tell your mother she's being irrational. Tell her I have to go for work. I stood between them on the Persian rug. The patterns on the wool seemed to swirl, a vortex threatening to swallow me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. I felt the panic rising, the hot, acidic urge to scream, to cry, to beg them to stop. But I knew the algorithm. If I cried, my mother would use my tears as proof of my father's cruelty. Look what you've done to her. If I agreed with my father, my mother would withdraw her affection, turning cold and distant for weeks. You're just like him. Emotion was a variable that guaranteed error. Vulnerability was an opening for attack. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. I swallowed the scream until it turned into a lump of ice in my throat. I forced my face to go blank. I relaxed the muscles around my eyes and mouth until I was nothing but a smooth, unreadable surface. This discussion is inefficient, I said. My voice was small, but it was steady. You are both shouting, so no data is being exchanged. They both stopped. They looked at me with a mixture of confusion and horror. They didn't want logic. They wanted a reaction. They wanted fuel for their fire. I denied them the fuel. I became the grey rock. I became the ice. End playback? I opened my eyes. The car was still swerving. The noise was identical. The years had changed, the faces had changed, but the dynamic remained the same. Human beings, terrified and hurt, lashing out at one another, hoping that if they screamed loud enough, the pain would transfer to someone else. If I did not intervene, the group cohesion would fracture before we reached the coordinates. The probability of an accident or a violent altercation was approaching 90%. Stop, I said. I did not shout. Shouting adds energy to the system. I simply removed the inflection from my voice, dropping the temperature of the conversation to absolute zero. A delicate excision of the noise. The argument faltered. Ronan glanced in the mirror again. Alasdair stopped rubbing his eyes. This circular argument is unproductive, I stated, my voice cutting through the cabin air like a scalpel. I looked at the back of Ronan's head. Alasdair is operating on a trauma response. His visual cortex is overstimulated by stress. Ronan is operating on a pathological desire for control because he feels powerless. Nia is compromised by sensory overload and is drowning in the collective anxiety of this vehicle. I paused, letting the silence settle. It was heavy, uncomfortable. Good. And what are you operating on, Your Highness? Alasdair sneered, though the jagged edge of his voice had dulled slightly against my flatness. Ice water? Structural integrity, I replied. We are currently a high-profile target with 0 defensible assets. If we stay in the open, arguing about morality while driving a stolen vehicle, we will be deleted. The Sierra location offers a probability of cover. Whether we save anyone or rob, the place is secondary to the immediate need to stabilize our own position. I leaned forward, pointing a pale finger toward the GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. Woodward Reservoir is 3 miles ahead. It is secluded. We stop. We re-baseline. Then we decide. Ronan met my eyes in the mirror. He held the gaze for a second, looking for a lever to pull, a pawn to move, an emotional hook he could use to spin the situation back to his command. But he found no purchase on the crystalline wall I had erected. There was nothing there for him to grab. Fine, Ronan said, exhaling sharply through his nose. He turned the wheel, the tires crunching onto the gravel shoulder as we approached the park entrance. Woodward. We regroup. I sat back, exhaling a slow, controlled release of breath. Crisis quarantined. The ice held. Night fell over the reservoir like a heavy velvet curtain. The heat of the day lingered in the soil, radiating upward, but the air near the water was cooler. We had parked the SUV under a cluster of oak trees hidden from the main road. A small fire crackled in a designated pit. Ronan had insisted on it, claiming we needed the morale boost, though I suspected he just wanted something to stare at that he could control. The reservoir itself was a sheet of black glass, reflecting the scattered stars and the thin sliver of the moon. It was peaceful. Still, it looked the way I wished my mind could look, dark, deep, and undisturbed by the chaotic winds of emotion. I sat on a large rock a few yards away from the fire, watching the others. They were a mess of jagged edges and exposed nerves. Zara Khan was sitting cross-legged by the flames, her hands gripping her knees so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked shattered. Her eyes darted around the campsite, tracking invisible flies, flinching at sounds only she could hear. "I can't see it clearly," Zara whispered, her voice brittle. "It's just fragments. Shards of glass. I see rebar. I smell ozone. A mountain peak with a bite taken out of it. It's all a blur." "That's not enough data," Ronan said, standing over her, his shadow stretched long and distorted across the dirt. "We need a vector, Zara. The Sierra is a massive range. North is a direction, not a destination." "I'm trying." Zara snapped, then immediately flinched. Terrified by her own outburst, she pressed her hands to her temples. "The timeline, it keeps shifting. 3 seconds from now, the fire goes out. No, it flares up. I can't lock it down. It's like trying to read a book while someone is ripping the pages out." "Focus, Zara," Alasdair muttered, poking the fire with a stick. "Just find the bloody lab." I watched them spiral. They were looking for a map. I felt a pressure in my chest, a somatic confusion. My brain labeled it frustration, but the physical symptom was a tightness in the throat, a phantom ache behind the sternum. I looked at them, broken, scared, desperate, and I felt a terrifying urge to wrap them in something protective, to freeze the world so nothing could hurt them ever again. But that was sentiment. Sentiment was inefficient. Action was required. I looked at Nia. She was sitting away from the fire, near the water's edge. She was rocking back and forth, a rhythmic, soothing motion. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest, trying to hold herself together. She looked like she was drowning in open air. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I walked over to her, my movement deliberate, sliding through the dark without disturbing the air. "Naya," I said. She jumped, her whole body convulsing as if I had struck her. She looked up at me with wide, wet eyes. "I'm sorry," she choked out, her voice barely audible over the lapping water. "I'm sorry I'm useless. It's so loud out here, Nova. The pain. It's like a siren. It never stops. Describe the siren," I instructed. She blinked, confused. "What?" "You are perceiving an input," I said, crouching down so I was eye level with her. I kept my face blank, a mirror for her to rest on. "You treat it as a feeling. You let it wash over you like a wave. Treat it as a signal. Is it constant?" Nia wiped her nose with the back of her hand. She took a shuddering breath, trying to focus on my words rather than the storm inside her head. "No," she whispered. It pulses. It hurts more when I face that way." She raised a trembling hand, pointing northeast, toward the dark, jagged silhouette of the Sierra Nevada mountains against the starry sky. "It's not just sadness, is it?" I asked. "No," Nia said, her voice dropping to a haunt. "It's fear, pure, distilled terror. But it's focused. It's not scattered like the city was. It's one point, like someone is screaming for help in a room where no one can hear them. It's a void. I processed this data. My mind arranged the variables. Zara's visions were temporal, chaotic, shifting, unreliable because time was fluid. But Nia? Nia's empathy was spatial. She wasn't just feeling emotion, she was intercepting a broadcast. The pain she felt was signal strength. I stood up and turned to the group. Stop harassing Zara. She is the wrong instrument for this task. Ronin turned from the fire, an eyebrow raised. The orange light danced on his face, making his expression unreadable. Explain, Nia, I said, gesturing to the girl on the ground. She is not malfunctioning. She is receiving a transmission. She's crying, Nova, Alistair spat, throwing his stick into the fire. She's having a breakdown. She's not a bloody radio. She is a radar, I corrected, my voice devoid of affect. If the output of the anomaly in the mountains is pain, or the dismantling of sentient life, then Nia is the receiver. The closer we get to the source, the higher her somatic distress will become. I looked down at Naya. I felt a twinge in my chest, a sharp, cold needle. I knew what I was suggesting. I was suggesting we use her pain as a Geiger counter. I was suggesting we march her toward the thing that was hurting her, using her suffering to guide our path. It was cruel. It was ruthless. It was also the only way to ensure the survival of the group. It makes no sense to let you get hurt for nothing, I told Nia, my voice flat. But if we use your sensitivity as a guidance system, we can locate the source. If we locate the source, we can shut it down. Then the noise stops. Can you maintain capacity? Nia looked at the mountains, then back at me. She searched my face for pity, for warmth, for the soft reassurance that everything would be okay. She found none of it. She found only the glacial reflection, cold, hard, and brutally honest. But perhaps that was what she needed. Pity is soft. Pity bends. Ice creates a structure you can lean on. She wiped her eyes again, her jaw tightening. A spark of something resembling resolve flickered in her gaze. I can hold it, she whispered. If it means stopping it, I can hold it. Good, I said. I turned to Ronin. We leave at sunrise. We follow the pain. I walked back toward the SUV, away from the warmth of the fire. I needed the distance. As I leaned against the cool metal of the car door, watching the others huddle closer to the flames, I wondered about the nature of my role. I told myself I was the logic engine, the stabilizer, the cold variable that balanced the equation. I told myself that quarantining my emotions was a tactical necessity. But as I looked at Nia, shivering in the dirt, I wondered if I was truly protecting them, or if I was just another person who had learned how to turn someone else's pain into a weapon. The wind shifted, blowing from the north. It carried the scent of pine and something else, something sharp and electric, the smell of a storm waiting to break. We would go into the mountains. We would find the source of the scream. And I would make sure that whatever was causing it froze solid before it could touch us. Get some sleep, I called out to them, my voice cutting through the night. Tomorrow we hunt. I climbed into the back seat of the SUV and locked the door. Safety is a locked room. Safety is silence. I closed my eyes and waited for the sun. Saga of the Outcast. Act 2, Viper. Chapter 12. The Geometry of Silence. POV, Alasdair Finch, the geometric variable. Location, El Dorado National Forest, High Sierra. Time, late afternoon. The world does not look like the world. That is the lie everyone else gets to live in. To Ronin, the road ahead was a strip of asphalt. To Nova, it was a vector of travel. To me? To me, it was a screaming, jagged scar of linear perspective tearing through a chaotic mesh of fractal equations that pretended to be pine trees. My head was pounding. A migraine, sharp and precise as a drafting compass, dug its point into my left temple. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, trying to close my eyes, but the geometry didn't stop when I blinked. It never stopped. The grids were burnt into my retina. We had crossed the threshold of the El Dorado National Forest an hour ago. The air had thinned, turning crisp and biting, but the sunlight was still a heavy golden hammer smashing down on the roof of the stolen SUV. Turn left, Nia whispered from the back seat. Her voice was wet, thick with the mucus of crying. It's louder. The scream, it's pulling. I glanced at the rearview mirror. I didn't want to look at her. Looking at people was exhausting. Faces are mobile topography. They shift, the angles collapse, the emotional variables ruin the symmetry. But I looked. Nia was pale, her skin ash-grey. She was trembling, vibrating at a frequency that made the edges of her silhouette blur in my vision. Beside her, Nova sat like a marble statue, a perfect, unmoving cylinder of stability. Nova didn't vibrate. Nova absorbed light. "We are running out of road," Ronan muttered, wrestling the steering wheel as the asphalt crumbled into gravel. The suspension groaned, a D minor chord of metal fatigue. "Zara, what does the timeline say?" "Static," Zara said from the passenger seat. She was clutching the dashboard, her knuckles white. "Everything past this mile marker is grey. It's like the film ran out." "Perfect," I groaned, letting my head thump against the glass. Blind and deaf. The classic tragic setup. If I see a cabin in the woods, I'm waiting in the car. Suddenly, Nia shrieked. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was the sound of a vacuum sealing shut. A sharp intake of breath that cut off instantly. Nia, Ayana, squeezed in the far back with Tenok, lunged forward. "It's gone," Nia gasped, clutching her chest. Her eyes were wide, darting frantically around the interior of the car. It stopped. The noise, it just cut out. Ronan slammed on the brakes. The SUV skidded on the loose gravel, dust billowing up in a chaotic particle cloud that my brain immediately tried to calculate the trajectory of. We came to a halt in a cloud of brown choke. "What do you mean it stopped?" Ronan demanded, twisting around. "Did we lose the trail?" "No," Naya hyperventilated, clawing at her throat. "It's not lost. It's void. It's like we stepped into a room where sound doesn't exist. It's deafening. I can't feel the bass line." She was spiraling. I could see the panic rising in her, a red parabola spiking off the charts. When empaths panic, the air gets heavy. I felt the pressure in my ears. Nova moved. It was a swift, efficient motion. Nova reached out and placed her hand flat against the nape of Nia's neck. It wasn't a gentle caress, it was a mechanical connection. Skin to skin. The effect was instantaneous. To my eyes, it was like watching a ripple hit a seawall. The chaotic, jagged lines radiating from Nia, the purple and red spikes of her distress, slammed into Nova and simply vanished. Nova was a grounding rod. She didn't absorb the energy. She negated it. 0-point cancellation. Nia slumped forward, her forehead resting on Nova's shoulder. Her breathing slowed. The panic dissolved into the recycled air of the cabin. "Better?" Nova asked. Her voice was flat, devoid of the maternal warmth the gesture implied, but the result was undeniable. Nia nodded, her eyes fluttering closed. She leaned into Nova, clutching the other girl's shirt. "It's quiet. When you touch me, the static stops. It's like you're a shield. I am an insulator," Nova corrected. "The signal is external. I am blocking the reception." Nia looked up at Nova. The angle of her gaze was 45 degrees, pure adoration. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're like a sister." A cold, safe sister. Nova blinked. For a microsecond, the symmetry of her face faltered, a variable she hadn't accounted for. Then, the mask reset. "We are on foot from here," Nova announced, looking at Ronan. "The vehicle is a liability on this terrain, and Naya's sensors are jammed by the proximity to the source. We need visual confirmation." "On foot," I muttered, opening the door and stepping out into the heat. Joy. The forest was a lie. I stood by the front bumper, adjusting my sunglasses. They were polarized, custom tinted to reduce the contrast, to try and soften the hard lines of the world. It didn't work. The trees were immense, ponderosa pines and Douglas firs, towering columns of biological data. But I didn't see bark and needles. I saw the repeating algorithms of growth. The fractal branching patterns, the golden ratio spiraling in the pine cones. It was too much detail. It was visual noise. The ground was worse. Granite boulders jutted out of the earth like broken bones, their surfaces etched with millions of years of erosion equations. The chaotic geometry of nature was overwhelming. It felt hostile. It felt like the code was glitching. "Gear up," Ronan ordered, popping the trunk. "We treat this as a hostile incursions. Tenok, point. Zara, center. Al, watch our 6. "My favorite position," I said, grabbing my pack. "Staring at where we've been, waiting for something to eat us. We moved out, leaving the SUV hidden behind a thicket of manzanita. The slope was steep. The air smelled of baked resin and ozone. As we climbed, the silence of the forest grew oppressive. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of our boots on the dry needles and the wind whispering through the branches. "We need a handle," Ayana said, breaking the silence. She was walking beside Zara, her movements fluid, athletic. She was a sine wave in motion. "If we're going to be a unit, we can't just be the Outcasts." "It sounds like a bad garage band." "Agreed," Tenok grunted from the front. He moved like a tank, heavy, deliberate, mass times acceleration. Outcast implies victimhood. We are no longer victims. "The remnants?" Zara suggested weakly. "Too sad," I chimed in, stepping over a fallen log that looked suspiciously like a decaying vector line. "Sounds like carpet samples." "The syndicate?" Ronan offered. "Too corporate," Ayana shot back. "We aren't selling insurance, Ronan." I looked at the group. 7 broken people hiking up a mountain toward a source of terror. We were a jagged equation, nothing balanced. Ronan's control issues, Zara's time sickness, Nia's leaking empathy, Nova's ice wall. And me. The glitch. "Viper?" I said. Everyone stopped. They turned to look at me. "Viper?" Nia asked, still holding Nova's hand. "Act2," I mumbled, tapping my temple. "The stage of the play where the poison is introduced. Plus, look at the path." I pointed back down the slope. The way we had come wasn't straight. We had been forced to switch back, winding back and forth across the mountain face. "We move like a snake," I said. "We strike when cornered. And let's be honest, we're all a bit toxic." "Viper," Nova tested the word. It sounded sharp in her mouth. "Vipers possess heat-sensing pits. They perceive the world through thermal differentials. It fits. We are hunting a heat signature of pain." "Team Viper," Ayana grinned. "It's edgy." "I like it." "Viper it is," Ronan decided, turning back to the slope. "Let's move, Vipers." I rolled my eyes. God, now we really sound like a comic book. But as we walked, I felt a strange stabilization in the geometry of the group. The name acted as a container, a bounding box. It held the loose variables together. We hiked for another hour. The sun began to dip, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched across the ground like black fingers. The angles became sharper. The contrast higher. I stumbled, my foot catching on a root that shouldn't have been there. The route looked wrong. It intersected the ground plane at an impossible angle. "Easy, Al," Ayana said, catching my arm. Her grip was firm. "You okay? You've been squinting like you're staring into the sun for the last mile." I pulled my arm away, perhaps too sharply. "I'm fine. Just, the resolution is off up here." "Resolution?" Ayana frowned. "You always talk like that. Like you're debugging code." "Maybe I am," I snapped. I stopped, leaning against a granite boulder to catch my breath. The migraine was a white-hot spike now. The team gathered around, sensing the halt. Ronan looked annoyed. "We don't have time for breaks, Al." "It's not a break," I shouted, the sudden anger surprising even me. "It's a recalibration." "What are you talking about?" Zara asked softly. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw Ronan as a square, rigid, trapped in his own 4 walls of duty. I saw Zara as a flickering cloud, undefined edges, existing in 3 places at once. I saw Tenok as a pyramid, grounded, heavy, immovable. I saw Nova as a perfect sphere, impenetrable, deflecting everything. "You think I'm just cynical," I said, my voice shaking. "You think I'm just the jagged, angry Scot who makes jokes to deflect. But you don't see it." I ripped my sunglasses off. The light stabbed my eyes, but I forced them open. "The world isn't real," I whispered. "Not the way you see it. You see trees? I see the wireframe. You see a rock? I see the polygon count. I see the stress fractures in the air before the wind even blows." I gestured wildly at the forest. "It's all math, everything. And it's barely holding together. The structural integrity of this reality is compromised. Every time I open my eyes, I'm waiting for the rendering error. I'm waiting for the sky to crash. Blue screen of death. I act like a clown because if I take this seriously, If I acknowledge that I can see the strings holding the puppet show together, I will scream and I will never stop. Silence stretched between us. A linear pause. Geometric perception, Nova said. It wasn't a question. She was categorizing me. You perceive the underlying physics of matter visually. I see the blueprint, I choked out. And right now? The blueprint is wrong. This whole forest, it's engineered. The angles are too perfect. The chaos is simulated. I looked at Nia. That's why your radar stopped. We aren't in nature anymore. We're in a construct. Ronan looked at the trees, uneasiness rippling across his face. A construct? You mean this is a simulation? No. I put my glasses back on, dampening the horror. I mean, someone terraformed this mountain. Someone built a cage and painted trees on the bars. Where? Tenok asked, scanning the perimeter. That's what I'm trying to find, I muttered. I'm looking for the seam. We pushed forward, but the mood had shifted. The shadows felt heavier. The trees felt artificial, like stage props watching us. We reached a clearing at the base of a massive granite cliff face. It rose 300 feet into the air, a sheer wall of grey stone stained with lichen and moss. Dead end, Ronan said. The GPS says the coordinates are inside the wall. Nia? Nova asked. Nia shook her head. Silence. Absolute silence, but cold. It feels cold here. I stepped forward. I walked up to the cliff face. To anyone else, it was random rock. Cracks, fissures, stains, chaos. But I adjusted my focus. I let the migraine guide me. I looked for the pattern that didn't fit the algorithm of natural erosion. Erosion is random but follows fluid dynamics. Water flows down. Wind shears laterally. I scanned the stone. Chaos, chaos, chaos. Order. My eyes locked onto a section of the rock about 5 feet off the ground. There was a fissure. To the naked eye, it was just a crack. But to me, it was a perfect sine wave. Nature doesn't make perfect sine waves in granite. Here, I whispered. I traced the line with my finger. It wasn't a crack. It was a seam. What is it? Ayana asked, coming up behind me. Look at the lichen, I said, pointing. See this patch? It's a fractal repetition. It's exactly the same as the patch 3 inches to the left. Copy, paste. I stepped back. I looked at the whole wall. I blurred my vision, ignoring the texture and focusing on the geometry. The fissures aligned. The moss patches formed a negative space. It wasn't just a wall. It was a relief carving, hidden by noise. It's a viper, I said. What? Ronan asked. The cracks. I traced the air with my hand. The head is here. The fangs are the overhang. The body coils down into the talus. Once I said it, the gestalt shift happened. They saw it. The random stains coalesced into a massive, stylized serpent etched into the mountain, hidden in plain sight. Subliminal architecture, Nova noted, designed to be ignored by the casual observer. Where is the door? Zara asked. I looked at the viper's eye. It was a small, dark depression in the stone. A perfect circle. Radius, 4 centimeters. Depth, unknown. The eye, I said. Tenok stepped forward. He reached up and pressed his thumb into the depression. Nothing happened. Maybe it's not a button, Naya whispered. Maybe it's a scanner. Or maybe, I said, seeing the faint, hair-thin line running from the eye down to a jagged rock at the base. It's a counterweight system. I knelt down. The rock at the base, the viper's tail, didn't sit right. The contact points with the ground were floating by a millimeter. Levitation? No. Suspension. Tenok, push the tail rock. Inward. On the Z-axis. Tenok frowned but crouched down. He braced his shoulder against the stone and shoved. It didn't grind. That was the scariest part. Stone on stone should grind. It glided. The rock slid inward silently on oiled bearings that had lasted decades. A heavy thunk echoed from inside the cliff. The viper's mouth, the overhang above us, split open. A section of the cliff face, 10 feet high and 6 feet wide, receded backwards 2 feet, then slid laterally into the mountain. Darkness poured out. Open sesame, I whispered, shivering. The air that rolled out of the opening was stale. tasting of recirculated dust and old copper. It was significantly colder than the forest air. Flashlights, Ronan ordered. Beams of light cut into the dark. The quantum goddess. Shh, put it away. The phone. The distraction. The constant, buzzing tether to your mundane little reality. Sever the connection for a moment. Come closer to the veil. That's it. I want to show you the heavy one. The stone that refuses to roll. You call him Tenok, but in the tapestry of the quantum, where I pull the threads of probability, he is something far more exquisite. He is a singularity in human skin, a collapsing star that has forgotten how to die. Do you feel that? The gravity? That is not the weight of the world. It is the weight of a soul that wishes to be unmade. He does not project power like a beam of light, he swallows it. He is the negation, the silence at the end of the sentence. Watch him now. Watch him step into the dark. He thinks he is protecting them, but the truth is far more delicious. He is seeking a pressure great enough to finally crush him. He is walking into the maw of the beast, secretly hoping it has teeth sharp enough to finish the job. Don't look away. The horror is the point. The breaking is the beauty. Saga of the Outcast. Act 2, Viper. Chapter 13. The Hidden Facility, Sector 5. POV Tenok Cardenas. The darkness in the facility wasn't empty. Darkness, in Tenok's experience, never was. It had weight. It had texture. It pressed against his skin like wet wool, heavy and suffocating. He stood near the shattered remnants of the security checkpoint, his boots planted wide on the warped rubber floor. He was a statue carved from anxiety and muscle, his arms crossed over his chest, not to look imposing, but to keep his ribs from expanding too far, to keep the thing inside him from leaking out. 10 feet away, the faint blue glow of a tactical flashlight illuminated Ronin Sato's hands as they moved across a wall-mounted console. The strategist was working fast, his fingers dancing over rusted breakers and bypass switches. The generator is cycling, Ronin murmured, his voice tight. The fuel cells are degraded, but the emergency loop is intact. 30 seconds to illumination. We should keep the lights off, Tenok said. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating in his own chest. If something is in here, light just tells it where we are. We need to see to navigate, Tenok, Nova said from the shadows. She was standing next to Nia, her hand still pressed to the back of the smaller girl's neck. The grounding technique. It made them look like a singular entity, a two-headed ghost. Alistair's headache is blinding him. We cannot rely on thermal vectors alone. Tenok glanced at Al. The Scot was leaning against the wall, pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes, muttering equations under his breath like a prayer. He looked frail. Breakable. They all looked breakable. That was the problem. Tenok felt the familiar urge rising in his gut, the cold, swirling nausea that wasn't sickness but gravity. He wanted to be a wall. He wanted to be the thing that stood between the soft flesh of his team and the hard edges of the world. But he knew, with a terrifying clarity, that he wasn't a shield. He was a bomb waiting for a detonator. Don't break, he told himself. Just hold. Be the stone. A deep, pneumatic hiss echoed through the corridor. The floor beneath Tenok's boots trembled. Here we go, Ronin whispered. The lights didn't flicker. They slammed on. It was an assault. Banks of overhead halogens, harsh and clinical, flooded the cavernous space with a white, antiseptic glare. Tenok squinted, his pupils contracting painfully. The room was not a lobby. It was a gallery. Stretching out before them, vanishing into the distance of the immense hall, were rows of cylindrical tanks. They were floor-to-ceiling glass tubes, reinforced with steel bands, bathed in the new light. They looked like massive test tubes designed for giants. And every single one of them was labeled. Project Chimera. Specimen 044. Status terminated. Project Chimera. Specimen 045. Status terminated. Tenok walked forward, his footsteps heavy on the tile. The silence of the group was louder than any scream. He approached the nearest tank. The glass was thick, ballistic grade, but it wasn't pristine. It was shattered. They aren't empty, Zara whispered, her voice trembling as she stood behind him. Look at the glass. Tenok looked. The shards of glass were on the outside of the tank. The floor was littered with them, Thick, amber-colored residue coated the jagged edges of the hole in the cylinder. They didn't break in, Tenok said, the realization settling in his stomach like lead. Something broke out. All of them, Ronan said, shining his light down the row. Every single tank. It's an egress pattern, Chimera, Alastair groaned, peeling his hands away from his face. His eyes were bloodshot, swimming with pain. In mythology, a beast made of incongruous parts. A lion, a goat, a snake. Unnatural fusion. This isn't mythology, Ayana said, her voice sharp. She was backing away from the tanks, her eyes darting to the shadows that the overhead lights didn't reach. This is a chop shop. Tenok walked further down the line. The smell hit him then. It wasn't just dust and ozone anymore. It was the smell of old copper, dried blood, and something acrid, like battery acid leaking into rotting meat. He stopped at a tank labeled Specimen 089. There was a claw mark etched into the steel base of the tank. It was deep. Whatever had made it possessed strength that defied biology. The metal had been peeled back like wet cardboard. Scrape. Tenok froze. It was faint. A rhythmic, wet dragging sound. Like a heavy sack being pulled over sandpaper. Shclack. Shclack. Ronin, Tenok said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The tone of his voice was enough to snap the team to attention. I hear it, Ronin said, drawing a jagged piece of rebar he had scavenged from the forest. Shclack. It was coming from the ceiling. Tenok looked up. The facility ceiling was a maze of ductwork, support beams and cabling. It was a jungle of industrial shadow. And something was moving in the jungle. System alert, a synthesized, monotone voice suddenly blared from speakers hidden in the walls. It was loud enough to vibrate Tenok's teeth. Biological containment breach detected in Sector Vi, initiating sterilization protocol. Lockdown active. Clang. Heavy blast doors at the far end of the hall slammed shut. Clang. The entrance behind them sealed. Trapped, Tenok thought. The thought was calm, almost comforting. Good. No way out means no running. We end it here. They're above us. Ayana screamed. The warning was a physical force. Ayana's voice didn't just carry sound, it carried impact. It hit Tenok's eardrums like a spike, sharpening his focus, forcing his adrenaline to spike. From the darkness of the rafters, 3 shapes detached themselves. They didn't fall, they descended. They crawled down the vertical steel pillars with the jerky, unnatural gait of insects, but they were the size of men. They hit the floor with a heavy, wet thud. Tenok stepped in front of Zara and Al. He broadened his stance, his hands curling into fists. He looked at the nightmares. They were wrong. The lead creature had once been human. Tenok could see the remnants of a torso, the pale, stretched skin. But the legs had been amputated at the knee and replaced with jagged hydraulic pistons that ended in serrated claws. The left arm was gone, replaced by a massive, fleshy growth that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. The face. There was no face. Just a smooth steel plate bolted over where the eyes and nose should be, with a single vertical slit for a mouth that dripped thick black saliva. Chimera. Oh God, Nia whimpered. She was still clutching Nova, her face buried in the other girl's shoulder. Nova, let me go. I need to. I need to know where they are. It will hurt, Nova stated. Let me go. Nova released her grip. The effect was instantaneous. Nia's head snapped back. She gasped, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. So many, Nia choked out, her eyes rolling back in her head. They aren't just monsters. There are people in there, screaming. They're all screaming inside the metal. The lead chimera hissed, a sound like steam escaping a valve, and lunged. It moved with terrifying speed, a blur of pale flesh and rusted steel. It wasn't aiming for Tenok, it was aiming for the weakest link. It launched itself at Al. Down, Tenok roared. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply was. Tenok threw his body into the path of the creature. He lowered his shoulder, bracing for the impact. The collision was like being hit by a car. The chimera slammed into him, the hydraulic claws tearing at his jacket, the weight of it driving the breath from his lungs. Tenok grunted, his boots skidding backward on the tile, sparks flying as the metal feet of the creature gouged the floor. Pain exploded in his shoulder, hot and sharp. Good, Tenok thought. The pain is real. The pain is focus. Back, Tenok shouted, grabbing the creature by its human throat and its mechanical piston leg. He heaved, using the creature's own momentum to slam it into a nearby tank. The glass shattered. Ayana, sound. Ronin barked. Ayana stepped forward. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked furious. She opened her mouth and let out a shriek that wasn't human. It was a sonic lance. The air rippled. The Chimera Tenok was wrestling convulsed, its steel faceplate vibrating. The creature shrieked back, a digital feedback loop of agony. "Flank left," Ronin commanded, diving behind a desk as the second Chimera unleashed a whip-like appendage from its back, slicing the air where his head had been a second before. The third creature was crawling along the wall, heading for Naya. "No," Nova said. She stood her ground, calm, immobile. But she wasn't a fighter. Tenok saw it. He saw the geometry of the slaughter about to happen. He was grappling with the first beast, his hands slippery with its black blood, but he could see the third one coiling to strike Naya. The pressure inside him spiked. It wasn't adrenaline. It was the backlash. The voice in his head, the one that always told him he was broken, suddenly screamed, "End it. Unmake it. Wipe the slate clean. Tenok," Zara yelled, throwing a heavy metal stool at the wall crawler. It bounced off harmlessly. Tenok let go of the creature he was holding. He didn't dodge its counterattack. He took a slash across his forearm, the pain barely registering. He turned toward the wall crawler. He looked at it. He didn't see a monster. He saw an error. He saw a stain on the world that needed to be removed. He reached out his hand, palm open. "Get away from her," Tenok growled. He didn't throw energy. He didn't shoot fire. He simply let go. He stopped holding the abyss inside. He allowed the self-destructive gravity of his own soul to leak out into the room. Psychic backlash. The air between Tenok and the wall crawler distorted. It looked like heat haze or a flaw in a pane of glass. Then, violence. The wall behind the Chimera didn't just crack, it pulverized. The ceramic tiles turned to dust instantly. The steel support beam inside the wall twisted, groaning as if subjected to centuries of torque in a millisecond. The Chimera was caught in the negation. It didn't explode. It imploded. The creature's mechanical legs buckled inward, its flesh compressed. It shrieked as the space it occupied suddenly became hostile to its existence. With a wet, sickening crunch, the creature was slammed against the buckling wall, flattened by a gravity that existed only in Tenok's mind. Tenok fell to one knee. The exertion was terrifying. It felt like he had just ripped a piece of his own soul out and thrown it across the room. His vision grayed. The first Chimera, the one he had wrestled, was recovering. It screeched, turning its eyeless face toward Tenok's exposed back. "Al, now!" Ronin yelled. Alistair, pale and shaking, looked at the heavy suspended lighting rig above the creature. He looked at the cable holding it. "Sine wave, tension snap," Al whispered. Al didn't touch the cable. He just threw a rock he had picked up outside. He didn't throw it at the monster. He threw it at a rusted coupling on the wall, a fulcrum point he had identified with his cursed eyes. The rock hit the coupling. The vibration traveled up the wall, hit the stress fracture in the ceiling mount, and... snap. The massive lighting rig crashed down. It landed squarely on the first Chimera, pinning it to the floor in a shower of sparks and crushed metal. The creature thrashed, trapped under 1,000 pounds of industrial steel. The second Chimera, the one engaging Ronin, paused. It sensed the shift in momentum. It sensed the predator in the room wasn't the one with the claws. It was the boy on his knee who smelled like void. It hissed, scuttling backward into the shadows of a ventilation shaft. "Let it go," Ronin panted, holding up a hand to stop Ayana from chasing it. "Secure the room. Establish a perimeter." Tenok remained on one knee. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. Around him, the floor tiles were cracked in a concentric circle radiating outward from his body. The air still tasted of ozone and static. He felt light. Terrifyingly light. Like he had vomited up poison. But he knew it would come back. The pressure always came back. Tenok? It was Nia. She had pulled away from Nova. She was standing a few feet away, looking at the flattened remains of the wall crawler. She looked at the mess of meat and machine. Then she looked at Tenok. There was no fear in her eyes, only a profound, heartbreaking sadness. "You're hurting," she whispered. Tenok slowly stood up. He wiped the black ichor from his arm. His face was a mask of stone once more. "We're all hurting, Nia," he rumbled. "That's why we're here." He walked over to the pinned chimera under the light rig. It was still twitching. The human part of it, the chest, was heaving. Nia walked up beside him. She placed a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said. Tears were streaming down her face again, but she wasn't sobbing. She was listening. "It's fading. The soul inside. It's thanking you." Tenok looked down at the monstrosity. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a demolition crew. "It shouldn't have been alive," Tenok said quietly. "Team Viper," Ronan called out, his voice regaining that commander's edge, though he was leaning heavily on the desk. "Status check." "Alive," Zara said, pulling herself up from behind a crate. "Shaking, but alive. Headache is manageable," Al muttered, kicking a piece of glass. "Though I'd appreciate it if you didn't destroy the structural supports of the building we are currently inside, Tenok." "Noted," Tenok grunted. "The lockdown is still active," Nova said, staring at the red lights pulsing above the doors. "We are sealed in, and there is at least one more hostile entity in the vents." "Then we hunt," Tenok said. He walked to the center of the room. He felt the darkness of the facility pressing in on them again. But this time, he pushed back. He looked at the empty tanks. He looked at the dark corridor leading deeper into Sector 5. The voice in his head was quiet for the moment. The explosion of violence had silenced it. Self-destruction origin, he thought bitterly. Maybe. Or maybe he was just the only one who knew that in order to build something new you first had to wreck what was already there. "Ayana, watch the vents," Tenok ordered, taking point. "Ronan, get that door open." "I'll hold the line." He stood in the light, casting a long, dense shadow. The anchor. The void. He waited for the next monster, praying that when the time came,
Please don't leave me on my own. And pack the bags and close the door. Don't drive away alone.
In the dead of the night I close my eyes, but my mind won't let me rest. Cause I'm haunted by the shadows that you instill in my head. Am I dead or alive? Cause it don't feel right with a hole inside this chest. Since you left, I'm a mess, I'm undead. Cause these nightmares, they come creeping, stealing my peace while I'm sleeping. Still got creatures under my bed, and I know they're never leaving. So I think I'll just keep them, let them fuck up all these demons that been keeping me from freedom. Finally, I can just let them go. Yeah, the boogeyman ain't got shit on me. I got one night light coming from my screen, still stuck in the room, write melodies. But lately I could really use some fucking sleep. It really don't matter to me. I would give it all up for a couple of Z's. Yeah, give it all away for another dream. Just give me one night of some fucking peace. And please don't mind my mental. It gets fucked up when I grip the pistol. Plain and simple, gun to temple. Light time now, low to hear the whistle.
Diggy, wake up.
In the dead of the night I close my eyes, but my mind won't let me rest. Cause I'm haunted by the shadows that you instill in my head. Am I dead or alive? Cause it don't feel right with a hole inside this chest. Since you left, I'm a mess, I'm undead. Cause these nightmares, they come creeping, stealing my peace while I'm sleeping. Still got creatures under my bed, and I know they're never leaving. So I think I'll just keep them, let them fuck up all these demons that been keeping me from freedom. Finally, I can just let them go. In the dead of the night, am I dead or alive? I've been running away from this pain. In the blink of an eye, I think I'm losing my mind. I think I really be going insane. In a dream I could fly way up in the sky, but the nightmare's where I stay. Yeah, these nightmares, they still haunt me ever since you went away. In the dead of the night I close my eyes, but my mind won't let me rest. Cause I'm haunted by the shadows that you instill in my head. Am I dead or alive? Cause it don't feel right with a hole inside this chest. Since you left, I'm a mess, I'm undead. I'm a mess, I'm undead.